The silence in the wreckage was worse than the screaming had been. Owen pulled himself through a twisted corridor that used to be the research wing of Perseus 7. 3 days ago, this hallway had been full of scientists rushing between labs. Now it was just torn metal and frozen air that leaked from broken seals. His salvage suit beeped twice, warning him about radiation levels, but he ignored it. Everyone still searching the wreckage was ignoring those warnings. What else could they do? 40,000 people had lived on this station. 40,000 beings from 17 different species, all working together, building lives in the emptiness between stars. The reactor explosion had killed most of them in seconds. The rest died in the hours that followed, choking on vacuum or burning in the fires that spread through the oxygen-rich sections. Owen had survived because he was in the veterinary clinic near the outer hull when it happened. The blast had thrown him into space, unconscious, and a rescue ship found him 12 hours later, half frozen but alive. His wife hadn't been so lucky. Neither had his daughter. They were visiting the Central Gardens when the core went critical that he pushed the thoughts away and kept moving. His scanner showed life signs ahead, faint but steady. Probably someone's pet that got left behind in the evacuation. He'd found 6 cats, 2 dogs, and something that looked like a purple ferret in the last 2 days. Returning them to their owners gave him a reason to keep searching when grief threatened to pull him under. The life sign was coming from behind a collapsed wall. Owen wedged his gloved hands into the gap and pulled. The metal groaned and shifted. His muscles burned with the effort, but the gap widened enough for him to squeeze through. Inside was a holding cell, the kind used for dangerous specimens in xenobiology research. The reinforced glass had shattered. Scorch marks covered the walls. And in the corner, buried under a fallen beam, something moved. Owen approached carefully. His helmet light swept across scales, dark as midnight, reflecting rainbow colors where they weren't covered in blood. A wing jutted out at an angle that made his stomach turn. Burns covered the visible parts of its body, and one eye was swollen shut that a dragon hatchling. Maybe 6 months old. The Dravic species, if he remembered correctly from the station briefings, his first instinct was to back away. Dragons were classified as dangerous megafauna across most of the galaxy. Aggressive, untrainable, kill on sight in many systems. The Council had strict protocols about them, and none of those protocols involved helping. But Owen looked at the creature and saw what he always saw when something was hurt. A patient, a living being in pain. The dragon's one good eye opened and fixed on him. There was no aggression there, no threat. Just fear and agony, so intense it made Owen's chest ache. The creature tried to move and let out a sound that was half whimper, half wheeze. Owen knelt beside it. His medical training took over, pushing aside the regulations and warnings. He pulled out his emergency kit and checked for a pulse. The heartbeat was rapid and weak, blood pressure dropping. Without treatment, the hatchling would be dead within hours. That he worked quickly, injecting broad-spectrum antibiotics and pain medication. The doses were guesswork based on the creature's size and what he knew about reptilian biology from Earth. The dragon flinched at the needle but didn't snap or claw at him. It just watched with that one eye, breathing in shallow gasps. The wing was the worst injury. Nearly severed at the joint, held on by strips of muscle and membrane. Owen had no way to reattach it properly here, but he could stabilize it and stop the bleeding. He worked carefully, using surgical tape and quick seal foam to hold everything in place. By the time he finished, his air supply was down to 30%. He needed to get back to the transport ship, but he couldn't leave the dragon here. It would die, and something about that felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. The universe had already taken so much. Did it need to take this too? Owen made a decision that would change everything. That he found a cargo container in the debris, one with intact seals and emergency oxygen. It was meant for transporting temperature-sensitive samples, but it would work. He carefully lifted the dragon inside, making sure the injured wing was supported. The creature was surprisingly light, probably malnourished even before the explosion. Getting the container back to his assigned refugee ship took all his remaining strength. He logged it as salvaged medical supplies and got it through the cargo check without anyone looking too closely. Everyone was too tired, too traumatized to care about proper protocols anymore. That night, hidden in an abandoned storage room on the refugee transport, Owen set up a makeshift clinic. He connected the container to a portable med scanner and checked the dragon's vitals. Still alive, still fighting, he sat on the floor and watched the creature sleep. Its chest rose and fell in an unsteady rhythm. Burns covered its scales. One wing was ruined. It was alone in the universe, the last of its kind from the station, with everyone who might have cared about it dead in the wreckage. Owen understood that feeling. He pulled off his helmet and set it aside. The air in the storage room was cold and smelled like recycled filters, but it was better than the suit. He was breaking at least 15 different regulations by being here. Harboring a prohibited species could mean prison time. If the council found out, he would lose his license at minimum. But when he looked at the sleeping dragon, he didn't see a monster or a threat. He saw a patient who needed him. And Owen had taken an oath a long time ago, before he lost everything, back when he still believed that helping mattered. Maybe it still did. Infection set in on the second day. Owen had seen it coming. The burns were too extensive, the wounds too deep. Even with the antibiotics he'd given, the dragon's immune system was fighting a losing battle. Its temperature spiked to dangerous levels. The scales around the worst burns turned black and began to peel away. He worked through the night, changing dressings and monitoring vitals. The storage room had become his entire world, a bubble of light and medical equipment in the darkness of the refugee ship. Outside, thousands of survivors crowded into temporary shelters, waiting for the council to process their claims and assign them new homes. Inside, Owen fought to save one life that nobody knew about. The dragon drifted between consciousness and fever dreams. Sometimes it would open its eye and look at him with something that might have been recognition. Other times it thrashed weakly against the container walls, making sounds that broke Owen's heart. He had no idea if dragons felt pain the way mammals did, but he treated it as if they did. Better to overestimate suffering than dismiss it. On the third day, someone knocked on the storage room door. Owen froze. He'd been careful, always checking the corridors before entering, using times when most people were eating or sleeping. But maybe he'd gotten careless. Maybe someone had tracked his movements. The knock came again, followed by a clicking sound. A voice spoke in the chirping language of the Kythera, one of the insectoid species from the station. Owen opened the door crack. Standing in the corridor was Chit, a medic he'd worked with a few times back on Perseus 7. The Kythera's compound eyes reflected the light in rainbow patterns. His antennae twitched forward, a sign of curiosity. "You have been spending much time in this room," Chit said in accented common speech. Other survivors notice. They wonder what Dr. Blake does alone with medical supplies. Owen's mind raced. He could deny everything, claim he was just processing trauma in private. But Chit was already moving past him, slipping into the room with the fluid grace of his species. The medic stopped when he saw the dragon. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the beeping of the med scanner and the dragon's labored breathing. Chit's antennae flattened against his head. "That is a Dravik hatchling. That is a dragon." "Yes," Owen said quietly. "Dragons are dangerous. Dragons are prohibited. My cousin died on the frontier world of Kessler 9 when wild dragons attacked the settlement." Chit's voice went hard. 43 people killed. 14 of them children. Why would you save this creature? Owen had no good answer. Nothing that would make sense to someone who had lost family to these beings. But he tried anyway. "I'm a vet," he said. "I took an oath when I got my license. Doesn't matter what species, doesn't matter what classification. If something is suffering and I can help, I help. That's what I do." Chit moved closer to the container. His compound eyes studied the dragon from multiple angles. "This one is dying. I know. You cannot save it. The burns are too severe. The wing is destroyed. Even if it lives, it will never fly, never hunt, never survive in the wild." Chit turned to face him. Why waste resources on a creature that has no future? Owen looked at the dragon. It was awake now, watching them both with its one good eye. Fear radiated from it, but it made no move to attack. Just trembled in the container, small and broken. "Maybe it doesn't need to survive in the wild," Owen said. "Maybe it can find a different kind of life." With you, if it comes to that. Chit was silent for a long time. His antennae moved in patterns Owen couldn't read. Finally, the Kithara made a sound that might have been a sigh. I do not understand humans, he said. You are a species of contradictions. You build weapons that can crack planets, but you stop to help injured animals. You conquer death through technology, but you risk your lives for strangers. My people find this behavior inefficient. Probably is, Owen admitted, but it is also why the galaxy needs humans. Chit moved to the medical supplies and began checking the inventory. Your antibiotic choice is wrong for a reptilian metabolism. You need something with a longer half-life, and these burn dressings will stick to the scales. We must use the gel type instead. Owen felt something loosen in his chest. You going to help? I'm going to make sure you do not kill your patient through incompetence, Chit corrected. If the council discovers this, we will both face charges. But I'm a medic also. I took an oath also in my own language to my own gods. The words were different, but the meaning was the same. Together, they worked through the night. Chit's knowledge of xenobiology filled in gaps that Owen's training had missed. The dragon needed different nutrients, different medications, different care than any Earth animal. With Chit's help, they created a treatment plan that actually had a chance of working. By dawn, the dragon's temperature had dropped back to normal ranges. The infection was still there, but no longer spreading. It managed to drink some water mixed with nutrients that Chit had synthesized from the ship's recyclers. Owen slumped against the wall, exhausted but hopeful for the first time in days. Thank you, he said to Chit. The Kithara's antennae twitched in what might have been embarrassment. Do not thank me yet. This is only the beginning. The dragon lives, but keeping it alive will be much harder. And if anyone else discovers what we are doing... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Owen looked at the dragon again. It had fallen asleep, breathing easier now. One small life saved from the wreckage. One small act of mercy in an uncaring universe. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The refugee fleet reached the council processing station 2 weeks after Owen pulled the dragon from the wreckage. Word came down through the ship's communication system. All survivors would be documented, interviewed, and assigned temporary housing on various council worlds based on their species and skill sets. Every container, every storage space, every personal item would be inspected for dangerous materials or prohibited salvage from the station. Owen had 48 hours to figure out how to hide a dragon. The hatchling was stronger now, strong enough to move around the storage room when Owen let out of the container. It followed him everywhere, making soft chirping sounds that almost seemed like attempts at communication. The damaged wing had healed as well as it could, but it would never support flight. The dragon didn't seem to mind. It hopped and climbed instead, using its claws to grip surfaces. Chit helped Owen forge documents claiming the storage room contained quarantined biological samples from the explosion site. Materials too dangerous to inspect without proper containment protocols. It was a thin cover, but it might work. Most inspectors wouldn't want to deal with potential radiation or biohazards. The night before the inspections began, Owen couldn't sleep. He sat on the floor of the storage room and watched the dragon play with pieces of salvaged metal. It had started doing that a few days ago, collecting scraps and arranging them in careful patterns. Owen had no idea what the patterns meant, if anything, but the behavior was deliberate and focused. The dragon noticed him watching and brought over a small piece of twisted steel. It placed the metal in front of Owen, then sat back on its haunches and waited. A gift. The creature was giving him a gift. Owen picked up the metal and examined it. Nothing special about it, just debris from a station. But the gesture made his throat tight. This wasn't the behavior of a mindless predator. This was something else entirely. He pulled up his datapad and accessed the station's research archives. Most of the files had been destroyed, but some backups existed in the refugee fleet systems. He searched for anything about dragons, about the Dravic species, about their behavior and history. What he found changed everything. The dragons hadn't always been wild. Centuries ago, according to fragmentary records, they had been civilized. They had built cities, created art, explored space. But a plague had swept through their worlds, something that attacked their neural systems and reduced them to animals. The few populations that survived became the wild dragons that everyone feared, creatures that retained their intelligence only in flashes, corrupted by the disease that had destroyed their culture. The council had known. They had chosen extermination over rehabilitation, decided it was easier to eliminate the species than try to help them recover. Owen looked at the dragon. It was watching him with intelligent eyes, waiting for his reaction to the gift. This wasn't a diseased animal. This was a being capable of thought, of connection, of growth. Given a chance, given care and time, what might it become? The door opened without warning. Owen jumped to his feet, moving to block the dragon from view, but it was too late. Lieutenant Ramos stood in the doorway, her hand on her sidearm. She was human, part of the security detail for the refugee fleet. Owen had seen her around the ship, but never spoken to her directly. Now she was staring past him at the dragon with an expression of pure shock. "Dr. Blake," she said carefully. "Step away from the creature." "Wait," Owen said. "Just wait. Let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been harboring a prohibited species? That you violated at least a dozen council regulations." Her hand tightened on the weapon. "I've been tracking your supply requisitions for days. Medical equipment, nutrient supplements, materials that didn't match what you claimed to be treating. I thought maybe you were running some kind of black market operation. I didn't think." She trailed off, still staring at the dragon. The dragon had backed into the corner, trying to make itself small. It was trembling, the same fear Owen had seen in its eyes back in the wreckage. It knew danger when it saw it. "Look at it," Owen said. "Really look. Does that seem like a mindless killing machine to you?" Ramos didn't lower her weapon. "Dragons killed 70 people in the outer reaches last year. Killed them and ate them. Wild dragons. Sick dragons. This one isn't like that." Owen moved slowly, reaching down to pick up the piece of metal the dragon had given him. "It brings me gifts. It mimics my movements. Watch." He raised his hand and waved. The dragon, still pressed against the wall, lifted one clawed foot and moved it in a similar pattern that Ramos's expression shifted slightly. Still wary, but uncertain now. "It's intelligent," Owen continued. "I've been researching. Dragons used to be civilized before a plague destroyed their society. This one is young enough that the disease never took hold. Given a chance, it could be what its ancestors were. That's speculation. So is calling it a monster based on what others of its species did." Owen took a step forward. "We're human, Lieutenant. How many other species were afraid of us when we joined the galactic community? How many still are? We were the violent ones, the aggressive Deathworlders who solved everything with force. But we proved them wrong. We showed that individuals matter more than species reputation." Ramos was quiet for a long moment. Her hand moved away from the sidearm, though she didn't relax completely. "If Command finds out about this, they'll euthanize it. They'll charge you with endangering the fleet. You could spend years in prison." "I know, and you're willing to risk that for a dragon." Owen looked at the hatchling. It had stopped trembling and was watching the conversation with what looked like understanding. "I already lost everything that mattered in the explosion," he said quietly. "My family, my home, my practice. This is all I have left. A chance to do something right. A chance to save one life when I couldn't save the ones I loved." He met Ramos's eyes. "So yes, I'm willing to risk it." The lieutenant stood silent, thinking. Finally, she sighed and holstered her weapon completely. "We need a better plan than forged documents," she said. "Because inspection starts tomorrow, and if anyone else finds this thing, we're all finished." Hiding the dragon during inspections bought them time, but it couldn't last forever. Ramos helped Owen move the hatchling to a more secure location, a maintenance crawl space that the inspection teams had already cleared. It was cramped and dark but safe. The dragon tolerated it better than Owen expected, seeming to understand the need for secrecy. But as the days passed and the refugee fleet prepared to disperse survivors to different worlds, Owen realized they were running out of options. He couldn't take the dragon with him to whatever colony world the council assigned. She was being sent to a Kithra settlement 3 systems away. Ramos would stay with the security fleet. They would all be separated, and the dragon would be alone again, unless Owen did something drastic. "This is insane," Ramos said when he explained his plan. "You want to go public?" You want to tell the entire galaxy that you've been hiding a dragon. Not just tell them. Show them. Owen pulled up a file on his datapad. There's an independent journalist based on the processing station. Blue 7. Centaurian. She's built a reputation exposing council corruption and species rights violations. If anyone will listen to our story, it's her. And if she doesn't, if she just reports us to the authorities, then we're in the same position we'd be in anyway when someone eventually discovers the truth. Owen looked at the dragon, which had grown noticeably in the past weeks. It was the size of a large dog now, its scales healing into patterns of midnight blue and silver. At least this way, we control the narrative. Chick clicked his mandibles in the way that meant he was thinking. The doctor is correct. Hiding has a time limit, but revealing has risks also. The council does not like being embarrassed. I'm aware, Owen said, but I'd rather fight this battle in the open than wait for it to find us in the dark. They made contact with Blue 7 through encrypted channels. The journalist was skeptical at first, thought it might be a hoax or a trap. But when Owen sent her preliminary evidence, including medical scans and video of the dragon's behavior, she agreed to meet. The meeting took place in an abandoned cargo bay on the processing station. Blue 7 arrived with camera drones floating around her crystalline body. She was tall and geometric, her form shifting colors as she moved, a being made of living light and mineral. "Show me," she said without preamble. Owen opened the transport container. The dragon emerged cautiously, blinking in the bright lights of the cargo bay. It looked around, taking in a new environment, then moved to stand beside Owen. Not hiding, not aggressive, just present. That Blue 7's form flickered through several colors, a sign of surprise in Centaurians. "You are not lying. That is actually a Dravic hatchling. Her name is Ash," Owen said. He'd started using the name regularly, and the dragon had begun responding to it. Dragons do not have names. Dragons are animals. This one does. And she's not an animal. Owen knelt beside Ash and held out his hand. The dragon placed a piece of salvaged metal into his palm. The same gift-giving behavior she'd shown from the beginning. She's intelligent. She learns. She communicates. She understands cause and effect. Blue 7 moved closer, her camera drones circling. "Demonstrate." Owen spent the next hour showing everything Ash had learned. How she could solve simple puzzles. How she mimicked speech patterns, trying to form words with a throat not designed for human language. How she recognized different people and responded to them differently. How she showed what could only be called emotions, joy and curiosity and fear and affection. The journalist recorded it all without comment. When Owen finished, she was silent for a long moment. "This will cause problems," she finally said. "Big problems. The council's position on dragons is well established. Many species have lost people to dragon attacks. Changing that perception will not be easy." "I know," Owen said, "but it's the right thing to do." Right and easy are rarely the same thing, Dr. Blake. Blue 7's form shifted to a deep blue, thoughtful. "But I will help you. Not because I like dragons or because I think the council is wrong, but because truth matters more than convenience. If this being is intelligent, then the galaxy deserves to know." The broadcast went live 3 days later. Blue 7 had edited the footage into a compelling narrative, intercut with Owen's interviews and the research about dragon history. She aired it across 14 systems before the council could react. The response was immediate and explosive. Half the galaxy demanded Owen's arrest. Security advocates called him reckless and dangerous. Survivors of dragon attacks protested, saying he was insulting the memory of their lost ones. Entire species lodged formal complaints with the council, but the other half rallied to his defense. Species rights groups cited the broadcast as proof that the council's classification system was flawed. Xenobiologists requested access to Ash for study. Even some council members spoke out, quietly, saying that perhaps it was time to reconsider old policies. The council had no choice but to convene an emergency session. Owen was summoned to testify, along with Ramos and Chit. Ash would be brought as evidence. The night before the hearing, Owen sat with the dragon in a holding cell. Tomorrow would determine everything. Freedom or imprisonment. Life or death for Ash. I'm sorry, he said to her. I try to protect you, but now I've put you in danger again. Ash pressed her head against his hand, a gesture she'd learned meant comfort. Through the translation device they'd built, she managed 2 words in halting, distorted common speech. Trust you. Owen felt tears sting his eyes. A month ago, this creature had been dying in the wreckage, alone and afraid. Now she trusted him with her life. He couldn't let her down. Okay, he said. Tomorrow we fight. Together. The dragon made a sound that might have been agreement. Or maybe just hope. Either way, it was enough. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Owen stood at the center of a circular platform surrounded by representatives from 40 species. They sat in tiered rows that rose up into shadows, their forms ranging from familiar to utterly alien. Voices echoed in a dozen languages, translated in real time by the chamber's systems. Ash stood beside him, wearing the tracking collar the council had insisted upon. She was calm despite the crowd, though Owen could feel her tension in the way she stayed close to his leg. The chief magistrate, a being of flowing water held together by force fields, called the session to order. Dr. Owen Blake, you stand accused of violating Council Regulation 847, harboring a prohibited species. How do you plead? Guilty, Owen said. No point in denying it. But I'd like to explain why. The regulations are clear. Your intentions are irrelevant. Then let me speak anyway. Owen looked up at the tiers of observers. A month ago, I lost everything in the Perseus 7 disaster. My wife, my daughter, my home. I was searching the wreckage when I found Ash, buried under debris, dying from burns and injuries. Every regulation said I should leave her there. Every rule said she was too dangerous to save. He paused, making sure he had their attention. But I'm a veterinarian. I took an oath to help animals in pain, regardless of species. And when I looked at Ash, I didn't see a monster. I saw a patient. So I saved her. Murmurs ran through the chamber. A representative from the Kathik hives spoke up, her voice harsh. Dragons killed 40 of my people on the colony world of New Haven, tore them apart in their homes. You expect us to believe this creature is safe? Those were wild dragons, affected by the plague that destroyed their civilization. Owen gestured to Ash. This one is different. She's young enough that the disease never took hold. She's intelligent, capable of learning and communication. She's what the Dravik species used to be before the plague. Speculation, another council member said. You have no proof. I have evidence. Owen activated his data pad, projecting holographic displays around the chamber. Medical scans, behavioral studies, video recordings. Ash can solve complex puzzles. She understands cause and effect. She's learned to communicate through a translation device. She shows empathy, curiosity, and the ability to form emotional bonds. These aren't the traits of an animal. They're the traits of a person. The displays showed Ash bringing gifts, mimicking speech, responding to commands she'd never been explicitly taught. The council watched in silence that a new voice spoke from the upper tiers. Rector, the council member from the Dravik home system, a being of crystalline structure that rang like bells when it moved. The human speaks truth about the plague. My people kept records. The Dravik were once spacefaring, once civilized. The disease that destroyed them was called the Hollow. It ate their minds, reduced them to instinct and rage. But there were always rumors of survivors, of hatchlings born without the corruption. The chamber erupted in debate. Some called for immediate euthanasia of Ash. Others demanded more study. Security advocates argued about public safety. Scientists wanted access to the dragon for research. Through it all, Ash stayed calm. She sat beside Owen, watching the chaos with intelligent eyes, occasionally making the soft chirping sounds that meant she was processing information. The chief magistrate called for order. The council must make a decision. Dr. Blake has violated our laws, regardless of his intentions. The question is what consequence is appropriate. I have a proposal. Rector's voice cut through the noise. Place the dragon under probationary custody. Assign Dr. Blake as guardian with strict monitoring. If the creature shows aggression or becomes a danger, Euthanization proceeds immediately. But if it continues to demonstrate intelligence and peaceful behavior, we revisit the classification of the entire species. That sets a dangerous precedent, someone argued. Does it? Rector's crystalline form shifted colors. We humans were once considered dangerous. The Kithra were classified as invasive pests. The Centaurians were thought to be non-sentient mineral formations. Many species in this chamber faced prejudice before they were accepted. Why should the Dravik be different? Owen felt hope flare in his chest. This could work. This could actually work. Another voice joined the debate, this one belonging to a massive reptilian being from the outer systems. I support Rector's proposal. My people remember when we were hunted for our appearance. We know the cost of judging a species by its past rather than its individuals. Give the dragon a chance. Give Dr. Blake a chance to prove his case. More voices joined, some in support, some against. The debate raged for hours. Owen's legs ached from standing, but he didn't move. Ash pressed closer to him, sensing his tension. Finally, as the station's artificial sun began its setting cycle, the chief magistrate called for a vote. The result was close. 32 in favor of Rector's proposal, 28 against, 8 abstentions. The motion passes, the chief magistrate announced. Ash, Dravik Hatchling, will be placed under probationary custody with Dr. Owen Blake as guardian. Terms are as follows. Tracking implant must remain active at all times. Monthly behavioral evaluations. Restrictions on travel to populated systems. Any sign of aggression will result in immediate termination of the arrangement. Owen felt like he could breathe for the first time in days. Thank you. We won't let you down. See that you don't, Dr. Blake. This council does not give second chances lightly. As Owen left the chamber with Ash, Ramos, and Chit waiting for him outside, he realized something important. They hadn't just saved one dragon. They'd opened the door to saving an entire species. To giving the Dravik a second chance at the civilization they'd lost, it wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, people who would never accept Ash no matter what she did. But they had a chance now. A real chance. Sometimes that's all anyone needed. 6 months later, Owen stood on the observation deck of Frontier Medical Station Kelvin and watched ships come and go against the backdrop of distant stars. The station was small compared to Persis 7, maybe 500 permanent residents, and another 1,000 rotating through for various reasons. It served the outer frontier colonies, places too remote or too poor to attract major medical facilities. Perfect for someone who needed to stay out of the spotlight, while proving a dragon could be trusted. Behind him, Ash sprawled across a bench that had been reinforced to hold her weight. She'd grown considerably, now the size of a small shuttle. Her scales had filled in completely, shimmering midnight blue with silver highlights. The damaged wings still couldn't support flight, but she'd adapted, using it for balance and expression instead. Patient in Bay 3 is ready for discharge. Chit's voice came through the comm system. The Kithra had requested transfer to the station 2 months ago, claiming that someone needed to keep Owen from making medical errors. Really, Owen suspected Chit had just gotten attached to Ash and wanted to see how the experiment turned out. On my way, Owen replied. He looked at Ash. You coming? The dragon stood and followed him through the corridors. She knew the station layout as well as he did now, could navigate to the medical bay, the cafeteria, the observation decks, all the places she was allowed to go. Station residents had been nervous at first, but Ash's consistent gentle behavior had won most of them over. Hard to fear a creature that helped carry supplies and purred when children petted her scales. The patient in Bay 3 was a frontier farmer who'd gotten his arm caught in harvesting equipment. Simple break, easily treated, but the man had been terrified when he first saw Ash in the corridor. Now he smiled when she entered the medical bay. There's my lucky dragon, he said. My kid's gonna be so jealous I gotta see you up close. Ash made a pleased chirping sound and moved to the diagnostic screen, tapping it with one claw to bring up the man's charts. She'd learned to help with basic medical tasks, reading displays, and fetching equipment. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to contribute. Looks good, Owen said, checking the bone regeneration. You can head home, but take it easy for another week. No heavy lifting. Yes, doctor. And thank you. The farmer nodded to Ash. Both of you. After the patient left, Owen sat at his desk and pulled up the monthly report he had to file with the council. Ash's behavior logs, incident reports, which were always blank, medical status, psychological evaluations. Every detail of their lives scrutinized and recorded. That IT was exhausting sometimes, living under constant observation. But it was also progress. Every peaceful month, every positive interaction, every time Ash proved herself trustworthy, the restrictions eased slightly. They'd recently been cleared to visit more populated systems. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. The door chimed. Ramos entered, now assigned as the station's security liaison. She'd become a regular visitor, officially to monitor Ash's compliance with council regulations, unofficially because she'd become friends with both of them. Got news, she said, pulling up a display. Blue 7 just released a follow-up piece. Looks like 3 more dragon hatchlings have been found in the Perseus 7 wreckage. They're all being brought here for evaluation. Owen felt his stomach tighten with hope and worry. 3 more? Are they healthy? Mostly. Some injuries, but nothing as severe as Ash had. The council approved temporary custody, same terms as yours. If this works, if we can rehabilitate them all, it might be enough to change the species classification permanently. Ash had been listening, her head tilted in the way that meant she was processing information. Through the translation device, which had improved considerably with practice, she spoke in halting but clear common speech. More like me? Yes, Owen said. You're going to have family, Ash. The dragon's eyes brightened. She'd been alone her entire life, the only one of her kind in a galaxy that feared what she represented. Now there would be others. Others who could learn, grow, become what the Dravik species was meant to be. Over the following weeks, the station transformed into something unexpected. A refuge for the lost and broken. The 3 new hatchlings arrived, scared and injured like Ash had been. Owen and Chit treated their wounds, while Ash helped them adjust, communicating in the clicking dragon language that apparently they all understood instinctively. More survivors from Perseus 7 began requesting transfers to the station. People who'd heard about the work being done here, who wanted to be part of something hopeful growing from the tragedy. The station expanded, adding new medical bays, research facilities, living quarters. One evening, Owen found himself on the observation deck again, watching the sunset of a nearby planet paint the station in orange and gold light. Ash sat beside him, and the 3 other dragons, now healthy and thriving, sprawled nearby. They'd started calling the youngest one Spark, for the way her scales seemed to glow. The other 2 went by Flint and River, names they'd chosen themselves through the translation devices. Did I do the right thing? Owen asked quietly. Saving you that day in the wreckage. Sometimes I wonder if I made your life harder by pulling you into all this. Ash was silent for a moment. Her common speech had improved dramatically. You gave me a life. Before, I had only pain and death waiting. Now I have purpose, family, future. That is not harder. That is everything. The council still doesn't fully trust you. A lot of people still see you as dangerous. Then we prove them wrong. Not with words, with actions. Every day we show them what we are. Ash looked at the other dragons, then back at Owen. You taught me that. You showed Galaxy that mercy matters more than fear. That individuals define themselves, not their species' history. Owen smiled. I think you're giving me too much credit. You did most of the work. We did it together. That is what makes it matter. The other dragons joined them, and for a while they all sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy continued its endless turning. Species rose and fell. Conflicts erupted and resolved. Civilizations built and crumbled. But here, on this small station at the edge of explored space, something different was happening. Something that started with one human refusing to give up on a dying dragon and grew into proof that compassion could change the universe. The explosion had taken everything from Owen. His family, his home, his old life. But from those ashes, something better had emerged. Not a replacement for what he'd lost. Nothing could replace that, but something meaningful. A new purpose. A new family, strange and unexpected. He looked at Ash and saw not what she'd been, a broken hatchling in the wreckage, but what she'd become. A bridge between species, a symbol of second chances, proof that the galaxy's most dangerous creatures could also be its most compassionate, given the opportunity. Thank you, Ash said suddenly. For what? For seeing patient instead of monster. For giving me chance when no one else would. For teaching me that kindness is not weakness. She pressed her head gently against his shoulder. For being my family. Owen wrapped his arm around her neck, feeling the warmth of her scales. You're welcome, and thank you for trusting me. For proving that one small act of mercy can mean everything. Around them, the station hummed with life. Multiple species working together, learning from each other, building something new from the ruins of tragedy. And at the center of it all, a human and 4 dragons, showing the galaxy that sometimes the bravest thing anyone can do is extend a hand to the thing everyone else calls a monster. The explosion took everything. But from the ashes came hope. And sometimes, that's enough to change the universe.